Thank you, Justin, for organizing this. And thank you to our speaker today, Daniela Lopez. But also thank you to our previous speaker, Carlos Belvedere, and our last speaker next week, which will be next month, which will be Michael Barber. So I just want to welcome him on behalf of SPHS, Society for Phenomenology and Human Sciences. We've been an interdisciplinary phenomenological group that was co-founded by various numbers of different disciplines from philosophy, sociology, psychology, communication studies, nursing, about 40 years ago. And we will be meeting again in person this coming May at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. So look for a call for papers to be forthcoming soon. And we hope to see you all in person. But in the meantime, Justin has organized this wonderful kind of reading group for us to get a chance to go through Schutz's Phenomenology of the Social World, and for us to kind of have some virtual time here together. So let me just say something in terms of the SPHS has prided itself on bringing together people from all different sort of disciplines, being commitment to interdisciplinarity, all different in terms of different countries. So you see that in the commitment of our speakers and who are kind of leading us through this group. But also different levels. So we have everyone from the most emeritus faculty to undergraduates who are joining us. So please, as you're participating in kind of questions and answers with each other, be aware of that sort of that we have this kind of commitment to learn together, and that recognizing people are all at different sort of levels in terms of their expertise. So thank you again for being here, and hope to see you at future SPHS events in person. And thank you to Justin and Daniela. And Justin, I'll turn it over to you to introduce our speaker.
Excellent.
And anything else I missed?
Nope, that was perfect. That was perfect. Thank you so much. All right. So our speaker for this second meeting is Daniela Griselda Lopez. She is a research assistant at the University of Buenos Aires. She's a sociologist who completed her PhD in the social sciences at Buenos Aires, and she currently serves as a member of the executive committee of the Alfred Schutz Circle. She said she wanted to introduce her own areas of interest herself. So with that, I will pass the mic over. Take it away, Daniela.
Okay. Thanks, Justin and Eric, for inviting me to take part in this reading group. I'm really happy to be here. The title of my presentation is a question, the phenomenology of the social world, the roots of a generative phenomenology. I first read the phenomenology of the social world in 2002. I was a sociology student at the University of Buenos Aires and had enrolled a theoretical research seminar called Subjectivity and Sociality. As a student, I had always felt a leaning towards social theory and had read with great interest the works of Weber, Parsons, Bourdieu, and many others. I have even read Alfred Schutz's collected papers one. However, I distinctly remember the experience of reading the first chapter of the phenomenology and the feeling of having discovered something truly valuable. What caught my attention the most was Schutz's methodological tool, which he adopted from Husserl. This tool involved the general analysis of consciousness, considering both its static and genetic aspects. It was interesting for me to see how the study of temporal dimension infused dynamism and vitality into the traditional Weberian categories. From that moment on, I began to attentively read Schutz's work, even though I didn't fully grasp the extent of his project. This became clearer to me first in the composition of my master dissertation on Schutz's connection with the Austrian School of Economics, and later with the writing of my doctoral dissertation on the Schutz-Parson debate. During those years, I had the privilege of visiting the Alfred Schutz archive at the University of Constance. There, I had also the opportunity to peruse and handle books from Schutz's personal library, and this period was marked by intense learning and lively and passionate discussions. My presentation of chapter 2 and 3 of the phenomenology will be informed by my previous readings. I will also present the chapters with my own recent insights. I'll pose some open questions from his work and would like to hear your thoughts afterward. As for the overarching goal of the book, I concur with Christopher Prendergast, who posited that Schutz's aims were shaped by the epistemological and methodological debates within the Austrian school, rather than by some abstract and unmotivated attempt to synthesize Weber and Husserl. Schutz faced methodological challenges inherited from the subjective revolution initiated by Karl Menger. This revolution replaced classical objective theory of value with a perspective based on subjective utility. Menger advocated for a focus on the types and typical forms of economic phenomena and argued that the fundamental concepts like the principle of marginal utility should be deduced through contemplation rather than derived from empirical evidence. Menger placed his work in the realm of exact research, essentially universally valid a priori as opposed to empirical research, which in his view provided contingent knowledge. The debate between Menger and Schmoller on this matter is well documented. Similarly, Ludwig von Mises, a prominent figure in the third generation of the Austrian school, advocated for an a priori economic, distinguishing it sharply from the history of economics focused on empirical data. Continuing in the same vein, he considered catalactics as a branch of praxeology centered on the exchange of goods and pricing within markets. But the late 20s, Mises' ideas encountered challenges from logical empiricism. Critics argued that the foundation of objective categories on intellectual intuition was unreliable and didn't adequately correspond to the empirical realities or, as Schutz discusses in this book, with the meaningful structure of the social world. At that time, Schutz was studying at the University of Vienna, where Hans Kelsen taught him law and Mises taught him economics. He met Mises in 1920 and joined his private seminar that same year. The seminar's initial task was to explore and discuss Weber's methodology. This was not arbitrary, as Weber's interpretive sociology began with the notion of subjective meaning and the methodological concept of ideal type. This concept had also been used by the Austrian, but as previously noted, were undergoing criticism due to the a priori nature of economic categories. Thus, Schutz's methodological concerns are rooted in his affiliation with the Austrian school. However, his book addresses more than just methodology. It also delves into the question of the object, that is, the subject matter of the social sciences. Right from the start in the brief preface, Schutz highlights the methodological problems in the social sciences and attributes them to the complicated relation of the social sciences to their subject matter. In this vein, in chapter 1, he stresses the urgency for social sciences to clarify the complex relations between the different dimensions of the social world. This entails a radical analysis of its foundation and the delineation of boundaries among its various strata. In fact, he states, the controversy over the proper subject matter and methodology of the social sciences is the result of confusion over precisely these strata. And I quote Schutz, each school then develops a methodology suitable to that level and initiates a whole new line of research. The level or structure of meaning, which was the starting point, soon gets defined as the exclusive or at least the essential subject matter of sociology. Schutz regrets that these processes remain understudied and poses the challenge of tracing all these meaning structures back to a single foundational element, which has been largely overlooked in the study of human sciences, the internal time consciousness. He argues that an in-depth philosophical explanation of consciousness, that is, the primordial phenomena of social being, is essential for the foundation of social sciences methodologies. He proposes to analyze the meaning structure of the social world, starting from Weber's focus on subjective meaning and extending beyond his work. In short, this is Schutz's diagnosis of the problem of the social sciences. Thus, for Schutz, the methodology of the social sciences should always be based on two pillars. It's insufficient to focus on rationality in constructing hypotheses and models such as the ideal types. At the same time, one must also investigate the processes through which everyday actors constitute their social world. It is precisely the lack of this second pillar, namely a theory of the constitution of the social world, that Schutz criticized in Weber's approach, in Mises' praxeology, and later in Talcott Parsons' theory of action. Schutz further criticized this in the logical positivism of Hempel and Nagel, stating that these approaches act as if the main problem of the social sciences, that is, how the social world is constituted in the first place, were already solved. Schutz aimed to philosophically illuminate the everyday practice of meaning constitution in the social world as a foundation of the methodology of the social sciences. Thus, the theory of constitution presented in this book consists of 3 steps. Firstly, in chapter 2, Schutz commences with a hypothetical sphere of the solitary ego, and drawing upon Husserlian philosophy, illustrate the origin of meaning in individual experience with a focus on the issue of self-understanding. Secondly, in chapter 3, he proceeds with an analysis of the understanding of the other, revealing that understanding others occurs simultaneously as a phenomenon of coexistence. In these processes, patterns of social experience shared intersubjectively emerge through the reciprocal coordination of schemes of subjective experience by a assigned system, for instance, language. Finally, in chapter 4, he states that the structure of the social world is the outcome of these processes. It is organized by intersubjectively shared typologies of actions, situations, and actors, forming our collective cultural understanding of the social world. In chapter 2, Schutz explores in a highly technical way the origin of meaning in the inner time consciousness. He draws on Bergson's concept of duration and Husserl's constitution of subjective experience, starting out with the phenomena of retention and reproduction. He analyzes in detail the various layers of units of meaning that overlap and build upon one another from the ego perspective. The primal unity of these experiences lies in their belonging to the ego. The second level is the unity of meaning, where the reflective glance rises the content of consciousness to a phenomenal status. Then he analyzes the configuration of meaning or meaning context, a higher stage of unit in which separate acts are combined into a higher synthesis. In this case, he emphasizes the pragmatically determined nature of the process of synthesis. Schutz also delves into interpretive schemes within which the ego organizes its experiences in the process of self-interpretation, a process which involves, and I quote, ordering lived experiences within the total configuration of experience. Moreover, Schutz expands the concept of reflection beyond retention and reproduction to include protensions into the future and discusses action as distinct from mere behavior. Actions involve anticipation of the future and are unified by the projection of a corresponding act. Finally, he also explores the motivational context of action as a context of meaning, and he distinguishes between the in order to motive, which explains the act in relation to the project, and the genuine because motive, which explains the project based on the actor's past experiences. After introducing this theory on how the ego interprets its experiences, Schutz proceeds to enhance and refine it by analyzing the processes of meaning establishment and meaning interpretation in the intersubjective world. The methodological issue of understanding meaning in social observation leads Schutz to progressively consider more mundane and empirical foundation. At this stage, the analysis of constitution shifts from acts of consciousness to the social world, transitioning from a transcendental perspective to a mundane one, and redirecting attention from subjective constitution to intersubjective meaning constitution, a shift that Schutz perceive as unproblematic. This unexplained transition is noticed by Thomas Eberle, who highlighted that Schutz, in order to outline the general guidelines of a theory of the other's understanding, makes a passage from transcendental to mundane phenomenology. Michael Tönnissen also took account of this movement. In the transition to the social world, he says, Schutz leaps out of the transcendental into the natural attitude, which only means that he situates his social ontology at the level on which the transcendental constitution of the other is already presupposed. I will leave this topic for further discussion. Now let me draw your attention to the German title of chapter 3, Grundzüge einer Theorie des Fremdverstehens, translated into English, sorry for my German, translated into English as Foundation of a Theory of Intersubjective Understanding. In this translation, something substantial has been lost. The same applies to the translation of the book title. Der sinnhafte Aufbau der sozialen Welt was translated as the phenomenology of the social world. The Spanish version, Fenomenología del Mundo Social, closely follows the original English translation, thus inheriting the omission from the English version. This is evident not only in the title of the book, but also in the translation of the word Fremdverstehen as intersubjective understanding in English and comprensión intersubjetiva in Spanish. The adjective friend, which translates into English as foreign, strange, alien, and in Spanish as extraño, extranjero, foráneo, has been somewhat buried in the translation. As a result, we have indeed lost a central dimension to approach alterity related to the structure of ownness and alienness, as well as the dimension of accessibility and inaccessibility. The intersection between ownness and alienness in the I-other relationship forms the foundational level of Schutz's approach to intersubjective understanding. Fremdverstehen refers to a mode of understanding which is other or alien to us. Thus, Schutz starts with a moment of dissonance and strangeness in interpersonal relationship, a reflection often disregarded in the haste to achieve pragmatic ends that require one to bracket one's subjective meaning. In chapter 3, Schutz makes the transition from self-understanding to the understanding of others, emphasizing this intersubjective experience of strangeness. He makes the crucial distinction between understanding our own experience of the other person and understanding the other person's experiences. Schutz argues that understanding another person's intended meaning is impossible because it would require one to explicate the other person's lived experiences in the same way they do. The postulate that one can observe another person's subjective experience exactly as they do is considered absurd, as it would imply complete coincidence of streams of consciousness, which would make them the same person. Therefore, intended meaning is essentially subjective and confined to the self-interpretation of the person experiencing it. This uniqueness within each individual stream of consciousness is essentially inaccessible to every other individual. Thus, literally, and I quote Schutz, all my experiences of the other self's experiences are still my own experiences, end of quote. The genuine understanding of other person involves various approaches. The interpreter starts by interpreting from his/her own experiences objectivation that manifest the other person's subjective experiences, whether it's their animate body or artifacts created by them, either signs or manufacture external objects such as tools, monuments, etc. These objectivations are products of rational beings' actions, serving as evidence of what occurred in the minds of the creators. Subjective meaning pertains to the meaning context within the producer minds. In contrast, objective meaning applies solely to the product itself, disregarding its actual production. The understanding of subjective and objective meaning represents a polar opposition with numerous intermediate steps in between, which Schutz will develop in chapter 4. Finally, the theory discussed in this chapter, focusing on two types of meaning interpretation of cultural products, has significant implication for social sciences. Schutz highlights the distinction between theoretical economics, catalactics, for instance, which deals with universal anonymous human acts as finished products, and economic history or economic sociology, which focuses on the meaning attributed by individuals in the social world. This final reflection presented in the excursus to chapter 3 point towards the methodological issues in economics raised at the beginning of this presentation. Turning our attention back to the central argument of the chapter, which revolves around understanding the other as a stranger, certain concepts from Husserl's philosophy find resonance in this context. Husserl characterizes the alien as a verifiable accessibility of what is inaccessible originally. In his work on the phenomenology of intersubjectivity, he similarly speaks of the paradoxical experience that something or someone is accessible in its inaccessibility. According to Husserl, the life world is from the very beginning divided into home world and alien world, and ownness and alienness are present with equal originality. Thus, we are confronted with the alien as the uncanny, the unknown, and the unfamiliar. That experience belongs to the constant challenges of a human experience that is never entirely at home. However, alienness does not mean that the door to reality is bolted shut, but rather that its sense is not fully disclosed. I believe that many of the ideas presented by Schutz in chapter 3 align with this perspective. Moreover, in later works, Schutz will articulate the analysis of ownness and strangeness in intersubjective understanding in various ways. This can be observed in the initial experience of dissonance we highlighted here. He also emphasizes the experience of strangeness in the description of the practical adjustment to shared conceptual frameworks where individuals test their ideal types in daily life in order to coordinate the understanding of the world. Additionally, he points out the emergence of incongruence between a group's typified scheme of orientation and the other's group scheme of interpretation. At this research level, Schutz characterizes the experience of strangeness in relation to in-group and out-group cultural patterns and their relatively natural conception of the world. Bernhard Waldenfels supports this view by drawing a parallel between ownness and strangeness in the work of Husserl and that of Schutz, highlighting that the separation in the life world between the home world and the alien world, originating from Husserl, corresponds to the well-known difference between in-group and out-group. So in principle, I'd like to leave this question open for discussion regarding how the moments of dissonance and the structure of familiarity and strangeness are hinted at in this text and in Schutz's subsequent work. Let me also revisit something I mentioned on the transition from chapter 2 to 3. This shift from transcendental analysis to the natural attitude, which I find somewhat connected to the relationship between illness and strangeness. To do so, I'd like to bring in a reflection by Anthony Steinbock. Steinbock reflected upon the phenomenological method and emphasized the fact that, and I quote, which matters, which Sachen can be given to the phenomenologist depends in part upon how the phenomenologist approaches them. The way of approach we call a method, end of quote. From this viewpoint, investigating certain topics involves deploying the tools appropriate to the topic in question. Husserl developed different devices to account for different aspects of phenomenality. In short, he drew a distinction between two approaches, the static approach and the genetic approach. I'm sure that most of you are acquainted with both methods, which are easily recognizable in Schutz's work. However, what I want to highlight here is a third method that Steinbock calls generative, which aim to account for geohistorical, cultural, and intersubjective phenomena. This method recovers Husserl's formulation of intersubjectivity articulated as a structure of homeworld and alien world. Within genetic phenomenology, the sphere of intersubjectivity does not go beyond the limit of a transcendental analysis oriented to the synchronic field of contemporaries. The generative approach, on the other hand, transcends that limit and is concerned with issues in which historicity is brought to the fore. Generative problems entail the dimension of sense constitution that take place historically, geologically, and intersubjectively. Attention is drawn then to the life world and its texture of rights, traditions, language, and intergenerational, cultural, and multicultural relationships that take place in the dialogue between the home world and the alien world. This structure is a new point of departure for a philosophy of the social world that is most concretely a generative phenomenology. Steinbock also mentions the possibility of movement between methods and matters by highlighting aspects of progression and regression as directional features that connect the different approaches. The idea is that directionality can be reversed or act locally on two or more dimensions. Complementarity thus shapes the methodological framework. The Husserlian zigzag figure serves as an illustration. This analysis allows one to go from the life world to the appearance of things in consciousness in both directions. The zigzag enables various layers of examination, a back and forth movement that research can undertake within its orbit or go through it by connecting several layers in such a way that the analysis of each one complements and illuminates the others. The fact that some methods are better adapted to certain topics underlies an important aspect of the methodological universe of phenomenology, which is not limited to a single device, but on the contrary, is open to variation. Taking these reflections into account, I wonder if it is possible to find the germ of a generative phenomenology in this book by Schutz, and if it's conceivable to explore a generative dimension in the rest of his work. Moreover, is it possible to say that the approach in this book resembles a zigzag procedure left and thematized and clarified? Thanks for your attention.